you came to this idea. I was there. I witnessed it during the pandemic.
Yeah.
We were out in Montana where we'd gone for spring break, and then like the rest of the world, everything shut down, and we were like, well, we're just going to stay here. We're not going back to New York City in the middle of this thing. So we stayed in Montana. You'd been toying around with the idea. You'd been doing some deep dives on it, thinking this could make a great idea for a book. And it was the first nonfiction, because you've written fiction before. You wrote Ghosts of Manhattan, which is an absolutely beautiful novel about this one man struggling to save his soul in the midst of the financial crisis and the financial world down on Wall Street. I love Ghosts of Manhattan. Followed by The Means. And we'll put some pictures up of us celebrating the birth of these books, because when you get the hardcover before it hits publicly, like today's your pub day, it's so fun. So we got Ghosts of Manhattan. That's when you became an author. Then you got The Means, which is politics and media meeting, and that's got another jaw-dropping ending. And then Trophy Son, which is about what we're doing to our children in athletics. And it's set against a fictional story, but it gets into a real issue.
Yeah.
And then you decided to do nonfiction because you talked about the boat and so on and so forth. So just describe how different it was to get a nonfiction book deal. What went into it? What was different in applying for, or seeking publication agreements, and then what was different thereafter?
Yeah, it's a totally different process. And as you say, I had been toying with the idea even before the pandemic, and I was thinking about doing it as historical fiction. And I'd even written some drafts and done a lot of research, but there's so little on the English language about Rudolf Diesel. And I was like, I'll just make up the dialogue and it'll be, make it happen. But then I found more stuff, and I had a clear vision of what it could be as a nonfiction book. So I decided to do it as nonfiction when we were out in Montana. And it is a totally different publishing process. On the novel side, with fiction writing, you tend to write the whole book. You have a manuscript, you submit it, and it's probably 95% of the way done. You might do some polishing with your editor, but what you sell is a finished book for the most part, a finished first draft, pretty much. On the nonfiction side, it's very different. You don't sell a finished book, you sell a proposal. And there's a standard look for proposals. It's roughly a 30-page document. There's a very detailed chapter outline. There's usually a sample chapter so they can get a sense of the writing. There's a discussion of books in market and a discussion of the research you're going to use. And, the cast of characters. And, so there are all these elements that go into a book proposal for nonfiction, which I didn't even know about. So I had a new agent on the nonfiction side kind of coach me through, here's what we need. And a lot of it was done because I had done so much writing about it when I was initially thinking of it as a historical fiction book. So put that together with my agent, and then, and again, this is all during COVID. So I haven't even sat in a room with many of these people. We're doing it was all Zoom. It's just crazy.
You're trying to get museums in Germany to answer your calls in the midst of the pandemic. It's like nothing's open.
Yeah, it was nuts. I mean, some people would go in, but no one other than an employee could go in these archives, and even the employees weren't going in very much. But yeah, so finished the proposal and sent it around, held the whole auction over Zoom. Normally you sort of meet editors and then, they participate in an auction, but all the editor meetings were over Zoom. Was very happy to have the book land with Peter Borland at S&S, who's a terrific editor who I knew only by reputation prior.
He's great with this era, and he's a huge believer in the mysterious case of Rudolf Diesel.
Yeah.
Big believer.
Yeah.
He's been very helpful, I have to say. Like, he's great. He challenges you. I think I'm your first reader, right?
Your first reader, number one, and most trusted feedback, particularly on like what's losing the reader. You got to bring it back over here. You're great with that. Peter was very helpful, in particular with structure, because the book needs to follow the Diesel thrust. But one thing I've gotten a lot of feedback in is the footnotes. There are so many little gems of information that can bring the era to life and give you some extra perspective. But you can't have too many of it because it's kind of a pain in the neck to be like reading, and then go down to the footnote and then back up. That's annoying. So they have to be special. I wanted to have only the ones in there that made you kind of look forward to the footnote.
And I would say over the past 3.5 years, from the day you cut that deal to now, Pub Day, we've kind of fallen in love with Rudolf Diesel. He's become a real character in our lives. Like, we talk about him.
Yeah, it's around the dinner. Even the kids, they all know elements of the case and what happened and what he did, his letters to his wife, and how, the many sides of his life. And he is this three-dimensional person walking around the house. I kind of miss working on the book. I mean, as much as I'm excited to talk about it, I'm sad that it's past the phase of spending, 8 hours a day with Rudolph.
Yes, I remember this is how I felt after Ghosts of Manhattan published. Nick Farmer was the protagonist in this book. And I've been begging you since you published that in 2012 right? I think.
Yeah.
To write a follow-up to that book. I want Nick Farmer to live again. And, Rudolph Diesel, you've covered it. So, I mean, he will not live again, though he kind of does. Thanks to you. There hasn't been, a spate of books coming out about Rudolph Diesel. You're one of the first to really do a deep dive into this really important man. And what kind of contact has there been from his descendants or anybody who's connected with him or anybody who knows about him?
There's a man and a woman, and the woman was descended from Rudolph's daughter. And she actually came over to America, was in Connecticut for a period of time, and spoke to her briefly. But she didn't have like troves of information. It was long enough ago that she didn't really have any papers or big perspective on, the disappearance. Mm-hmm. But she did talk about him and the family lore, and that was a lot of fun. And then there was a man who lives in France, and I think he's actually not even a direct line of Diesel. It was like Diesel's uncle. He comes off of that line, but his last name is Diesel, Jean-Philippe Diesel. Mm-hmm. And he works in healthcare, and he actually had done some of his own sleuthing around Europe. So he pointed me to an archive that I had not yet been in touch with in Denmark, and one in the Netherlands. And that had some great old photos.
You must have been so happy to find out somebody's actually doing a deep dive.
Yeah, I just mailed him a book. So
good.
He should get that any day.
Millions of Americans earn and use credit card rewards. A few big box retailers want to take those rewards away. What the? That's according to the Electronics Payment Coalition, a sponsor of today's episode. Rewards that you may like to use on your groceries or your school supplies, cash back, to save on your gas and to grow small businesses, whatever you use that cash back for, and travel miles to make memories. The so-called Credit Card Competition Act would eliminate credit card rewards. No more travel miles, no more cash back. Visit handsoffmyrewards.com to learn more. And if you want to help them, tell your legislator to stand up to the retail giants and to support consumers and small businesses. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.